people joining as we go along, and that's absolutely fine as well. I'm very happy for that to happen. Sorry about the dog in the background. Oh, classic, isn't it? Okay, great. It's probably the postman arriving. He's having a bit of a go with that. Great. Okay. Well, I make it 6:30 India time and 1 o'clock at UK time. So if everyone's happy to, we'll make a start today. So first of all, thank you, Esther, for inviting me along to this call. My name is Julia Sadler. I'm one of the careers advisors at Oxford Careers Service. And I work with Fiona Whitehouse, who works with Esther to put together these micro-internships and the summer internship program as well. So I believe Esther's put together a really interesting program of events for the week, and I think I'm on first. And the idea was that I would give a bit of an introduction to careers. Well, originally I was going to talk about careers and heritage, but I realised that actually you're going to get lots of top tips and advice this week on heritage careers. And I'm conscious that some of you might be thinking more broadly than just heritage. You might be thinking about more widely into the creative industry. So I thought it would be helpful if I did a presentation on an introduction to careers in heritage and the creative industries. So I've asked if you could just switch off your cameras, which I can see that you've done. Thank you, and to turn off your mics, just to keep things to sort of give us a fighting chance with the bandwidth. Great. Okay. I'm going to leave questions to the end of today's presentation, if that's okay. And then you can either put your questions in the chat function, or when it comes to Q&A, we can just turn on our mics and cameras and just have a bit of a chat that way. Okay, so what I'm going to try and cover today is to give you an overview of the creative industries, including heritage. I'm going to talk about the skills that are required, working in the sector and what that's like, deciding what you want to do within this broad creative sector, some tips and help on how to understand your industry and how the industry recruits, perhaps, and what that industry looks for in its candidates. I'm going to talk about networking quite a lot, because that is definitely a common thread throughout the whole of being successful in the creative industries, including heritage. Being able to network is really important, and I'm hoping I can kind of demystify it a bit and make it seem less daunting than maybe to some of you it might do at the moment. Then I'm going to talk about developing your CV and your portfolio for these careers. And then at the end, I'm expecting I'll take about half an hour, possibly a little bit less, on the slides. And at the end, then I'll try and answer any of your questions. Okay, so in terms of what are the creative industries, it's a very broad sort of term, and it covers sectors such as advertising and marketing, even architecture, crafts, design, fashion, film and TV, video games, radio, photography, publishing, museum, galleries and libraries, music, and the performing arts, so acting, dance, comedy, and a lot more. And there are some of the brands, if you like, that are very active in these areas, and where you can gain quite a lot of information about these different sectors. And of course, during the coronavirus, some of these sectors have fared better than others. So, for example, I'd say two of the sectors that have done really had quite good years, actually, is the gaming industry, and also publishing, because people have been at home a lot more. So they've been buying books and they've been playing games. But of course, sadly, other sectors, and they might be the sectors that you're particularly interested in today, museums, galleries, libraries have had to close, certainly in the UK, for periods during lockdown. And they're just kind of coming to terms now with how they can reopen and get those museums and galleries back to some sort of normality. Film and TV, parts of that sector have done okay. I think Netflix has managed to still create some content, but they've had to kind of simplify. So anyway, that gives you a bit of a sense of the smaller sectors within the creative industries. Okay. The skills required, they're going to vary a little bit depending on which of those sectors we're talking about, but there are some common threads. So to work in the creative industries or to work in heritage, it's important you can be resilient, so bounce back from setbacks, that you are creative, that you're flexible, and realistic about your appetite for uncertainty. And I've put this here because what we'll come on to talk about later is a lot of the roles in these sectors involve freelance work, short-term contracts. So they're not necessarily the most, they don't necessarily offer the most security. And it's important to do a bit of soul searching and work out how comfortable you are with that prospect. Or are you in fact someone who needs the sort of security of a regular paycheck to feel comfortable? Another important skill is to be able to build a network, and we will come on to that, and I'll give you some guidance as well on networking. Be open to constant learning. These sectors change, some of them at a really rapid pace. So being happy to keep learning on the job is important. To be able to recognize and acknowledge transferable skills. So those of you who are on the micro-internship program this week, and those of you who are going on to work on the summer internship program, think about all the different skills that you're building, whether it's research skills or presentational skills, teamwork perhaps, and think about how they could apply to future roles, not just in the sector that you've gained the experience in, but transferring it to other sectors as well. So it's all about the skills that you've gathered as much as the sector you've been in. Technology is going to play an even greater role in these industries. So try to make sure that you develop relevant skills, and don't underestimate the skills you've been building this year using Zoom, using Microsoft Teams. As a careers advisor, I do quite a lot of CV checking with students. And I'm surprised at how few put that down as a skill. I think because they assume we're all doing it, we can all do it, but it's still worth stating on your CV that you've, presented on Teams or Zoom or whatever. You might have organised events on those platforms, and that's a really good thing to talk about on your CV going forwards, because we're all going to be using those platforms a lot more. Another skill, or I suppose character trait, is an ability to diversify your income stream. And by that I mean, gone are the days where we have one sort of career for life, job for life. I think it's a really good skill to have in the creative arts if you can spot different opportunities and have what some people call a kind of portfolio career. So you might be working for one organisation for a couple of days a week, but also have other projects on the go that bring in other income for you to keep things ticking along. Okay. I wanted to talk now about working in the sector and the realities of that. So you might have fellow students at Oxford who are keen to go into maybe sectors such as government work or, let's see, management consultancy, law, or banking. And those sectors quite often will recruit people through a graduate scheme, a very structured scheme, quite far in advance. Sometimes for law, it's 2 years in advance in the UK, certainly. and, you know, and those are kind of tried and tested routes into those sectors. But that's not the case with arts and heritage. There are a very limited number of graduate programs. So, for example, the Hayward Gallery have a graduate scheme. The BBC have a graduate scheme. One of my sectors that I specialise in is publishing, and you can get into the big publishers like Penguin Random House or HarperCollins through graduate schemes, but they're not the most common way in. They exist, the ones that do exist only hire usually a few people per year. You're much more likely to get into these sectors through short-term contracts, freelancing, or perhaps entry-level jobs, which I'll come to talk about later. So, as I just said, there's a higher than average likelihood of being self-employed or freelance, at least for some of your career, or of working on short-term contracts. And this is, you know, for some people that might feel a bit daunting. For others, it can feel quite a freeing way of working, and it can be a way to experience lots of different areas in a short space of time. So it can definitely work to your advantage. Okay, salaries may be lower than those other sectors that I mentioned a few minutes ago, especially at the start of your career. So for those who are driven to earn a high salary, this might not necessarily be the area for you. Working environments, well, they can range from offices or at the moment at home, art, design, film, photography studios, but also theatres, museums and music venues. And hopefully, you know, over the coming months and year, we'll start to see people engage in those buildings a lot more, those environments. Working hours can vary enormously from regular 9 to 5 kind of office hours to working evenings and weekends, particularly if you're putting on events in these sectors. And there's the flexibility of choosing your hours as a freelancer, which might fit quite well for you if you're at certain stages of your life where you need that flexibility because of other commitments, perhaps. When you're working in this sector, it's really important to keep up to date with industry developments. And one of the ways to do that, if I go back a few slides, you remember I showed you these logos of various organizations. So for instance, for publishing, you would keep up to date by looking at the Publishers Association website, or you know, in the UK it would be publications like the Bookseller, for example. The BAFTA website is a really good way of keeping in contact with what's going on in the TV, film, gaming as well industry. So looking at some of these websites will be a really good way to make sure that you're keeping up to date. So I'll just go forward again. Okay, so how do you find work in this sector? Think about what you want to do. So really define which industries you want to work in. This is very important as each industry will have its own hiring practices. So you need to be aware of them to be able to find work. You don't have to choose just one industry, but if you are interested in multiple industries, when you're doing your research, it's easier to think of them separately, if you like, when you're sort of looking into those. You may find some overlap. Good. Okay. So I'm going to now talk for the next few slides about understanding the particular industry that you want to go into. It's all about the research. So think about who are the key groups, organizations or employers in this particular sector, whether it is TV and film, whether it's museums and heritage, whether it's publishing. Think about who those names are. Who are those organizations, associations, employers? So they might be, as well as associations, they might be unions, they might be companies, they might be charities or not-for-profits, could be publications, it could be event organisers. So identifying who they are will really help you, as they're all potential employers. One of the, I think one of the tips that I'd love you to take away from today is to consume the content. And let me explain what I mean by that. So when we've had panel discussions at the Careers Service over the couple of years that I've worked there, whenever we have anyone from museums, whenever we've had anyone from the journalism sector, for example, or international development, or TV and film, the one thing that they all say is, whichever industry you're interested in, you need to engage with it and have an understanding of what's already in the market. So if you want to go into the film industry, it sounds obvious, but watch films. Find out what's going on at the moment. What are people making? What are the trends? What are the themes? Who are the directors? You know, what are Netflix doing? What direction are they going in? Who are their biggest competitors? So those are the sorts of things to think about when you're consuming the content. So some of you on this call, I know, are interested in working in museums and galleries. So visit as many as you can, which I appreciate hasn't necessarily been as easy over the last year as it has in the past. But of course, you can go virtually. A lot of the museums are putting on really interesting virtual tours, virtual events, talks, presentations. So really worth going along to those. Keep up to date with what your favourite museums are doing. What exhibitions are they putting on? What ones are they stopping? What's not making them money? Because they have to make money to survive. What's worked well in the past, what's working better now. Have a think about that. If you're interested in film, don't just watch the films, but look at the credits at the end. And you know, look at all the people involved in filmmaking. Read the trade newspapers, listen to panel events. We generally have we have really good panel events on at the Careers Service. So do come along. If you look on our website, which is careers.oxacuk, we have a term planner that is always on the landing page of the website. At the moment, it's still the term planner for this term because we've only just finished, but we're putting together next term's term planner at the moment. Have a look at some of the events we've got going on. They will all be virtual next term, just as they have been over the last year. And what that does mean for panel events is we can normally get speakers from around the world because they're not limited to having to get to Oxford. So do have a look at those panel events, and have a look into festivals. There's been lots of virtual festivals over the last year. So just a summary at the end, there's a lot of great content, often free right now, that's available online. Okay. Other tips on understanding the industry is to think about what roles exist. So there are many creative roles, but even more roles that support and facilitate creative endeavours. So when you think about creative careers, or perhaps if you think about museum work, it's not just the curating of the exhibitions that's the only role. There's lots of other roles that support that work. So coordinator work, access and outreach, perhaps publicity, front of house, assistant roles, human resources, legal, and also accounting as well. So for example, working on film sets, I know for a fact that one of the roles that's always really difficult to hire for there is being an accountant on a film set. So being a management accountant. So if you're interested in films, you know, there are lots of sort of support roles that are sought after. Don't overlook these roles. They're kind of less obvious roles because they're often a great way to learn more about a sector and get a foot in the door as well. Our advice would be to be practical. So your dream or your ideal role may not be available right now because perhaps you don't have enough experience, or because perhaps the organization isn't recruiting into that role at the moment. But other roles mentioned above are a great way to learn about that sector, and also to build a network in the meantime. My final slide on understanding the industry is to think about how the industry recruits. So what are their typical recruitment practices? Some industries will want you to do a structured internship. Some will offer a graduate program, although, as I said, not that often in this particular area of the creative arts. Some will expect you to have done a sort of training scheme, or perhaps have formal qualifications. And I know Esther said at the beginning of this call that some of you have on your minds, do you need to do a master's program, a master's degree, sorry, to go into this sector? And we can talk about that in the Q&A if you like. And I think it will vary enormously on the different sectors, but we can talk about that later. How does it recruit? Does it recruit generally permanent contracts, or does it tend to take people on for contract work, so short-term contracts? Do speculative approaches work in this sector? If you think they do, then we've got some really good guidance on our website about writing a speculative letter to an organisation. And also, do they have specific job sites? So in a little while, I'll show you all the different creative careers industries that we have got briefings on our website. And within those briefings, we have an external resources section for each of the briefings, and we list the job sites that are particularly popular in those particular sectors. So, for example, let me use publishing as an example. The bookseller has a good job site that you could use for that. You're likely to have to use a combination of these different routes in order to find work, but it's important to know which ones exist, so which job sites exist, for example, to find as many opportunities as you can. Okay, so networking. It's a bit of a tricky word, networking. I find a lot of people worry about what it means, but first of all, it's very important for this sector. And when I say networking, I'm not talking about a need to have contacts from your school or from your family, or even within Oxford itself. That's not what I'm talking about when I talk about networking, because anyone can network. And it's not as scary as you might think. It's simply about finding opportunities to meet or contact people at all levels within the sector. So you don't have to have a ready-made list of family friends who work in museums, or people, at your school whose mums and dads worked in for different employers. That's not what we're talking about. It's about you identifying people that perhaps you could have a chat with. So here are some ideas for how you can network. It can be as simple as joining a student society or a Facebook group where you can find people who share your interests and you can potentially collaborate with. So that could be a really good way of doing that. And I know at Oxford, there are so many student societies. If you go onto the Oxford University website and Google and search for them, you can. There's a long list of the different student societies that you can join. So it's all sort of ready-made there, really, for you. Another really good way to find out more about the sector and to talk to people who already work in it and find out what they like, what they don't like, what are their top tips, is to use LinkedIn. And by using LinkedIn, I'm not really talking about having a fantastic profile. I'm talking about using it to do your research. So there's a University of Oxford alumni page on LinkedIn, and you can search within the alumni to see, who's working at the various museums, TV production companies, publishing houses that you're interested in joining. Once you found some people who perhaps went to your college, went to Oxford, did your course maybe, that's quite a nice way in when you write to them on LinkedIn and say, I'm really keen to also go into heritage work, acting, performing arts, and I'd love to spend 10 minutes just having a chat with you. So you're not asking them for an internship or for a job, but you're just having a chat and finding out, you know, what they think about the industry and perhaps how they got into it. Another really good thing to do is to attend industry events. And as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of these free on things like Teams and Zoom at the moment. Once you've been to these industry events, and it could be, for example, some of the events that you're going to go to every evening this week that's been lined up for you by Esther, you might have heard some of the speakers talking at these events and think, actually, I really like the sound of what they do. I wonder if I could have a chat with them. And of course, because you've listened to them speak at an event, that's quite a nice introduction, a nice icebreaker. Perhaps when you write to them on LinkedIn, or perhaps if they've given out an email at the event to have a chat. We run most terms at the Careers Service, we run a workshop called Cringe Free Networking. And I know that there's one in Trinity term. So if you think it might help and you'd like some tips on networking, do come along to that event. And then I've put here a link to our website. We've got some guidance on networking on there. So it's www.careers.oxacuk/networking. It's probably the piece of guidance I recommend most frequently, actually, to students in one-to-one sessions. And there's lots of tips in there about why network, what is it, how to go about it. And we even list some questions that you can ask if you get a bit stuck. And that we know that works really well, particularly in the industries that we're talking about today and that you'll be learning about this week. A little bit of advice on how to develop your CV or portfolio, because for some of the industries within the creative arts, having a portfolio of your work, perhaps if you want to go into design, if you want to go into gaming, it's really important to start building up a portfolio. So that's just as important as getting the CV together. So some tips on that. Many entry-level positions, and perhaps I should explain what I mean by entry-level positions before I continue. Entry-level positions are quite often have the word assistant in the title, so it might be editorial assistant in publishing, or design assistant, TV production assistant. And these are entry-level because they're early in your career, maybe your first role out of university. And they're advertised usually when they become available in an organization. So rather than the graduate scheme where an organization every September will recruit 10, 20, 80 new starters at the same time, and they all go on the training together, these are advertised when there's a business need. Either someone has been promoted, leaving a space, or they've gone on maternity leave, leaving a space, so that needs to be filled. So that's what I mean by entry-level positions. And they're usually recruited just before they're needed. So whereas a graduate scheme might be a year in advance, entry-level positions usually are advertised 2 or 3 months before you would start. Even though they're entry-level positions and they're sort of the first role in a career, they often require previous experience, either as an amateur or professional, and that is a nod really to those kind of performing arts roles. Look for create opportunities to build your experience. So there might be, so those of you on the micro-internship this week, that's an ideal way to build that experience. And those going on the summer internship as well, absolutely brilliant way to build your knowledge and your experience. But there are other ways. So there might be online courses that you can take to develop a relevant skill. So these might be provided by the industry specific training providers. Some of those logos that we saw at the beginning, BAFTA, Publishers Association, they might have their own courses that you can take part in. If you're an Oxford student, and I appreciate that not everyone on the call today is, so I hope this hasn't been too Oxford centric, but those of you who are at Oxford, you've got free access via the Oxford IT team to LinkedIn Learning. And so that means if you particularly wanted to go into a very creative role, for example, in design, you might want to have a look at some of the free InDesign courses or Photoshop courses that they've got on LinkedIn Learning. It's a really nice way to build your experience there. Ask yourself, are there alternative ways of producing content? So instead of theatre, which has been tricky at the moment, there might be an ability to get involved in filming or streaming performances. You think about using social media to promote your work. So, and it will vary which social media sites are more popular in certain sectors than others, but Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or build your own website. In some sectors that would be expected. So for example, if you work in journalism, and you're a freelancer promoting your own work, then you would be expected to have, it could be quite a simple website, but you'd still be expected to have a website showing your portfolio of work. A really good website with advice on that, by the way, is something called Journo Resources, if you wanted to have a look at that. And the other thing you could do is blog about your work and your experiences as well. Okay. I just wanted to put here a little bit of information about summer and micro-internship providers for those students at Oxford. This is just a sample of some of the micros and summers that we've had in the past and currently. So of course these are, would be really good ways to get some experience. If you have a look on that link to the internship yearbook, you can read about what previous students have done on these heritage internships and find out what skills they developed. Okay, good. So before we move on to the Q&A, just a quick summary for this sector. Really think about what you want to do, understand your industries, consume the content, find out what roles exist. Networking can be a really good way to do that, and find out how the industry recruits. Networking, really important for this sector, and do have a look at that guidance for ideas on how to do that. Keep trying to develop your CV or portfolio while you're at Oxford. I know you're very busy, and there's some pressure to do well in your degrees, whether that's undergraduate or postgraduate. But if you can carve out a little bit of time to work on these while you're there, we can help you at the Career Service. But it's such a rich place to find opportunities, student societies, internships, clubs, volunteering at museums when they open again, perhaps on a Saturday morning, if you can. Attend events at the Career Service, and do book an appointment with a careers advisor on Career Connect. We do one-to-one appointments where we can help with all sorts of career-related questions. And there's three of us, actually, sorry, four of us who work in the creative industries cluster. Okay, I've put here some useful resources. So if you go to our website, this is an open access website, by the way. This isn't Career Connect. And so anyone can have a look at these sector briefings, whether you're an Oxford student or not. And they're very, very thorough, and we cover all of those different sectors there. So that's the place to find it. the careers website under sectors and occupations. I also wanted to mention, and I know you've got Oliver Cox coming later later in the week to give a talk. He's on a panel. He's from Torch, which is the Oxford Research Centre for the Humanities. So he'll be able to tell you more about the work that Torch does, but they're a great place to find out more about careers in arts and heritage. We also have some guidance, because I've talked a lot about you're quite likely to freelance in this sector. It's worth having a look at that briefing on freelancers and whether you feel it's right for you. Good. Okay, so time for questions now. So I'll stop sharing my screen so that I can see the Zoom screen a little bit bigger, and I can see that some things have come up in the chat. So I haven't been able to see this before. Very happy to read these out, or if somebody wants to turn on their screen and mute themselves, if we can just ask the questions directly.
Thank you very much. This was a really compact presentation, a lot of information there. Of course, to some of the students from India, some of these things were new and kind of based on the UK, but a lot of what you said is of course valid anywhere. Perhaps I should add also, from many applications I've seen, I really value the cover letter, and which is really important and shows the level of engagement of students, for example. And of course, we at the Center for Historic Houses we are offering internships. We also collaborate with many palaces in India who are also supporting internship programs, and these are open sometimes remotely, sometimes, especially now during the pandemic. This is open to students from all over the world, but also, of course, particularly the students from India.
Excellent, that's really good. You mentioned there about cover letters. As an employer, do you have any top tips on cover letters?
Yes. So one thing is that I think you should be more interested in what can you give rather than what can you gain. So sometimes I've had letters saying like, you know, I'm really interested in heritage. I want to get more experience, but I have other students who really spend the time looking at our organization, or in our case, listening to some of the resilience lectures, and very, very familiar with what we do. And I can see from their letter how they will be able to contribute. So I think this is really important, you know, to show how you can actually make a difference rather than only asking for things that you can learn from this position. And that's really important. But I'd like to know also from you, what do kind of employers value, for instance, in the heritage sector? What are they looking for in, you know, personal conversations that you've had with, you know, some of the leading employers in the sector?
Yeah, I think I've put some guidance there in the chat, which is our briefing on writing good cover letters, and we go through there a suggested structure. You don't have to follow the structure, but it's one way to make sure you've covered everything, which is the kind of polite introduction, you know, who you are and what you're doing at the moment, and then why you're applying for the role. Whether it's an internship or a permanent role, why, including why that organisation, and then the bit about why you. And just like you said there, Esther, it's not just about, it's certainly not all about why you, in a sense of, you know, what you're going to gain from this. It's about what can you add, what skills can you bring to the role or the internship, how are you best suited to it, how. And you don't have to repeat everything on your CV in the cover letter. I would advise picking out 2, 3, 4 experiences from your life so far that make you suitable to that particular role. So really, really try and tailor it. And I think that's always going to be, that's the key to getting an interview, is tailoring. So tailoring the cover letter, tailoring the CV. What do you think?
Yes, definitely. I also noticed, you know, thinking about my own experience when I was a student, you know, and my friends were all extremely enthusiastic, and we were just curious about absolutely everything. And I did many different internships in many different sectors, you know, journalism, newspapers, radio, and so forth, banking even. And all of these things really help me now, because my work is very entrepreneurial, and you have to have this kind of entrepreneurial spirit if you work in the heritage sector. However, now as an employer, I'm looking for students who really, where I can see a clear interest in the heritage sector, maybe not kind of selling nails one day and doing them, you know, just trying to experiment, because I feel I'd like to support someone who has, because the heritage sector is something like it's not only a job that you take, but it's really like a specific profession where you bring some really love and passion to the sector. And I would like to see this in someone. So if I see a CV that is very consistent, you know, I tend to be more interested in this. And I couldn't understand this when I was a student, because often we couldn't have that particular work experience. And, you know, and I thought, well, can't you see the potential I have? But, you know, really, I think employers want to see what you've already done. And so that you don't need to kind of start from, you know, Adam and Eve.
Definitely. Definitely. I can see that Archie's raised a hand, so I'll come to Archie in a second, but I just wanted to add to that. I think I did a lot of recruiting when I worked in publishing before becoming a careers advisor. And it's such a breath of fresh air, I guess, when you look at an application that's really tailored to the job, and when you realize that someone's put in lots of research. So they've really, you know, for heritage, it might be that they've visited the museum, they've really thought about the direction that museum's going in. They've looked on the website, they've spoken to people who've worked there. It can really then come across in the application. And you'd be surprised how much it will set you apart from other candidates if you can show that you've done a lot of research. That is the trick, I think. Archie, did you want to turn your camera on and ask a question?
Yes, all right. Thank you so much for the talk. I really, a lot of things I hadn't really thought about before, but I just wondered, building on what you were saying about these sort of quite skills-based courses that we can do, is it worth doing, so for example, if you're interested in going into film, doing a sort of online film studies course that's more academic focused as a way, if your degree isn't strictly relevant to the industry you want to go into? Or
so would a film study, it's a really good question, would a film studies course, would that have quite a big fee attached to it, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, from research that I've done, I think there are lots of free things out there. But do you think it's, do you think that's something that's worth doing? Because I just worry that you can look too academic and not have the practice.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I know what you mean. Do you know what I think? I think to check that, it would be a good idea to do a bit of networking. So find people who work in the film industry. And because I'm not a recruiter in the film industry, so I'm not, you know, I can't say hand on heart whether they would value that or not, but I think it'd be worth checking it out with someone who does work in that sector.
There's also a generational aspect. So I think many careers that you had maybe 20 years ago, there were many more offhand, and nowadays you have these specialized degrees that we didn't have 20 years ago, and the expectation is different. So that is also something. So you can find people who have leadership positions in the heritage sector that might not have a PhD. But nowadays, with, for instance, you know, multidisciplinary, very interesting heritage courses that combine management of historic sites with archaeology, with history, and chemistry, for example. You know, these are very interesting degrees to have.
Yeah, true.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you for your question. Any other questions? I know we've got a lot more people on the call now than when I started my presentation, so thank you to those who have joined. Does anyone want to turn their camera on and to ask a question?
And Julia, perhaps if you could share your discussions you've had with employers and what they're looking for and the kind of feedback that they've given and so on from students.
Yeah, sure. So I think it comes down really to the thing that I hear a lot from employers is that sort of getting involved. So when we've had panel events at the Career Service in the past with employers from the museum sector or from perhaps theatres, we've had Oxford Playhouse represented, or the Ashmolean, or these are all places in Oxford that we can generally get employers along to come along to have a discussion. The one thing they say is if you want to do it, then try it out. Practice, get involved in your spare time. So you're at, a lot of you, I appreciate not everyone, but those on the call who are at Oxford, you're at an organisation that has loads of student newspapers, for example, loads of student societies. So do get involved, try it out. So if you're interested in becoming a journalist or going into communications in the museum sector, for example, try your hand at writing. Write for the Oxford Student, write for the Charwell. Do you like the process? Do you like creating? Do you like being creative? Do you like working in a team? Do you like working with designers? That's a really good way to test the sector out, but also to build up skills. And I think I would go as far as saying if you left Oxford and really wanted to go into journalism but hadn't written for those newspapers, then an employer might think, well, why not? These are very well established newspapers, and that's just an example from journalism. But I think the same would apply to heritage. You happen to be at in a city that has some of the leading universities in the UK. Visit them, try and get involved in their programs.
And maybe if I talk about the Indian context, I was really surprised by a number of students who started their own initiatives if they didn't find something in place. And I was really impressed by they started their own newspaper or their own blog and so on, extremely entrepreneurial, which is, of course, another wonderful possibility nowadays, social media and so on, that I didn't really have to that extent, 20 years ago, because you have to kind of work with established firms.
That's a really good point. And I think if you have established a blog or you've written some articles, then don't be afraid to put a link to those in your applications, on your CV, on even in your cover letter, because it does show that, as Esther said, that sort of proactive initiative, and they can also see your writing style, how creative you are. Yeah, good. Okay, does anyone else want to ask a question? I do think a lot of you might find that some of your questions, if you do have any, would be answered by looking at those sector profiles that I mentioned in the slides. Hello there. I see a camera on. Hi, how are you?
Hi. I'm good, thank you. The question I was going to ask was, you mentioned student journalism, and to say you wanted to go into journalism, student journalism would just be a must, and employers would ask, why have you not done this whilst at Oxford? And you said the heritage.
I'm really sorry, but I was only getting about one out of every 3 words there.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. So you were saying you might, perhaps if you try turning your camera off, but leaving yourself unmuted, and try and ask the question again, and let's see if that helps. Sorry.
No problem. Is that any better?
Yeah, it is actually. So I got the bit about, I mentioned for journalism, if you want to go into journalism, get involved in the student newspapers. And then I think you were going on to say what?
Sorry, I froze for a second. What I was wondering is, what exactly are the equivalents there for heritage? What are the equivalents of, say, writing for the Cherwell? opportunities you really should have taken up whilst you're at university, and
Yeah,
that would speak to your interests?
I'm not sure there's a list of things that you should do while you're at university in the same way. I mean, for journalism, it's you know, it's kind of on your doorstep really, and so easy to get involved in. I think it's what I said earlier really, which is, you know, about consuming the content. So if you want to go into, I think you said heritage, then, you know, visit national trust sites if you're in the UK, go to museums, go to exhibitions, you know, keep abreast of what's happening in the industry. It's all of those things, I think, and taking part in these micro-internships and summer internships that are offered.
And of course, you don't necessarily need to wait for specific internships that are offered, but you can also actually go out and write to these institutions, and you know, sometimes write to the smaller institutions. In my case, when I was a student, I wrote to the Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art, which is not so well known like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, because I had missed the deadline for application. I wasn't an art history student, and they created an internship position for me. And so it's also a kind of, you know, I had an edge because not so many people applied to the museum, and certainly not from abroad, because they work more with local students and so on. So for them, it was very attractive to have someone from abroad. So again, this is a kind of entrepreneurship resourcefulness about how you can actually create your work opportunities, and of course, volunteer with local historic houses, sometimes, you know, also independent, you know, privately owned historic houses or organizations near to where you live, for example.
Exactly. So the ones that I think I totally agree with that. And I think if they're near to where you live, then it's not going to be as difficult. You know, we're really conscious of, you know, lots of people just can't afford to volunteer, you know. It's a bit of a luxury, isn't it? And I think, but if it's a museum that's around the corner, it doesn't have to be grand or that big, but it would volunteering there a little bit would give you a real insight into what's involved.
Sorry.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
And the advantage of the pandemic is that you can also now work remotely from the comfort of your home. I've noticed a number of people are offering remote internships, some of them paid in the heritage sector, which I came across. So this is a fantastic opportunity for students now.
Yeah, I agree. Good. Well, thank you for your question. I'm sorry that we weren't able to hear all of it, but I think we got the gist. Okay. Well, I think I think there's probably no more questions out there. I think everyone's had an opportunity to ask their questions. So thank you to you all for coming along. And I wish you all the very best with your week. It sounds like it's going to be really interesting for those who are going along to all the other events that that have been organised. And thank you, Esther, for inviting us along.
Thank you so much for taking the time out. And to the other students, of course, who are not participating in the micro-internship with the events that we created that are public, everyone, you know, has the chance to participate, learn about it, you know, meet some of the leading people in the heritage sector that we've invited. So we really have people from, you know, from the Smithsonian, from the V&A, from the Louvre, from English Heritage. So really the kind of world's leading institutions. So I'm sure it's going to be very interesting. Please come along, join. And you know, also we are creating a prize at the end for those who write a blog or write something about the institutions, the particular sessions we've had. We will you know, share this on our social media post, and please get in touch with us about this. So thank you very much, Julia. I would like bye to you.
Thank you all. Bye.
So we now have Deepika. Deepika is an early career professional who's done a fantastic course, which I really value very highly, at the Royal College of Art and the V&A. And she is going to share her experience, because I know from a number of students who had this question about, should we just get real work experience straight away, or should we do a graduate degree? So I'd like for Deepika now to share her experience about her course. Hi there.
Hi, I'm sorry my video is not working for some reason. I think I'll just present
Deepika, if there's a problem with the presentation,
Sorry. I think I lost the internet for a bit.
uh-huh.
I have it. I can share my screen, right?
Great. Okay, you go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my video is not working for some reason. So I'll just talk without my video on. Hi everyone, so I'm Deepika. Sorry you cannot see my face, but I'm a design historian. I have recently finished my MA in History of Design from the VNA RCA, as Esther mentioned. I'm also a writer and I've previously worked on some institutional projects. So what I'll share today is a bit about my journey, why I pursued the MA History of Design program, kinds of careers and master courses that are in the field which I have come across like recently from my recent experiences. And I would also be happy to answer any questions that you have. So this is a gist of my journey. My interests lie at the intersection of contemporary architecture and design, and I also have some experience in working in museums. I have done a bachelor's in interior design from CEPT in Ahmedabad. Then I worked in Locus Design, which is a museum design firm, as a research coordinator, was also a research and teaching associate at my university. And I volunteered at the VNA during my time at the MA. I also have worked as a design journalist for some publications in India. So this is a bit about how I got into the heritage sector from a design to interior design. So like the course I pursued, it's a 5-year course and we had a lot of exposure into, we visited the pole houses, which are the traditional houses of Ahmedabad, and we had so many exhibitions, and there was also this childhood love for museums, and I've literally grown up reading the culture column of newspapers. So I think in my 4th year I decided that I won't be setting up my design studio, but I'll go in this sector. And when I was starting out, so I've mentioned 5 people on the left, and they're all in the heritage sector, and they have a degree like in architecture and interior design like I do, and seeing those people excel really inspired me to pursue my own path. So yeah, I think when I decided that I want to, go in this sector, I started connecting with people, and I connected with a senior who had just finished her MA in architectural history from Bartlett in London, and she had set up CEPT Archives, which is India's first architectural archiving institution. And talking to her and about prospects, having that one-on-one relationship with her really helped me to make the right decisions. So when I got my first job at Locus, I asked her if I should go for it. My design journalism gigs also came through her. And what I want to say is that having that mentor who has around 5 years more experience than you is a very important career strategy at the beginning, because it really this because this sector is so wide, there is so much happening. Sometimes when you start out, there is this disillusion, what should I do, what should I not do, and having that person to ground you can be very, very motivating, and it's a very important strategy to have. And I also think that we shouldn't, like, around 5 years is good, because the world is changing at a very fast pace, and having someone who is just a bit senior can introduce you to more opportunities when you're starting. And this is a book which I've written, Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. I think the way she talks about how to navigate a career, it's quite interesting. And for anybody who, I think it's a very good read. So why I pursued the MA History of Design from the VNA and the RCA. So I had, when I was doing my interior design, I realized that, there is a gap between the designer and the public. And there are stats which say that, just 3% of the world's buildings are designed by professionally qualified architects, and I had these kind of questions that why is that, and what can we do to foster a culture of design in India. And I started working and I started thinking, and I wrote a dissertation which charted the change in kitchens in India through lifestyle media. So that went really well, and that guided me to this course. And one of the best things about this course is the fact that it is centered on public facing history, and the collaboration with the VNA, it is at the heart of this course. Like, we had a main course library at the VNA itself, and we had many sessions with the curators and with archivists which were planned as part of the course. So that really gives you an insight into how a cultural institution works. And there is, I think, in a heritage sector, this public facing aspect, this aspect of reaching out to diverse audiences is very important, and this course also focused on that. And so yeah, and the other thing is that my batchmates are like, we were a bunch of 30 people, and everyone's specializations, they were very different. So we had students who studied fashion to graphics to ceramics to architecture and to even digital design, and ranging from the 14th century to contemporary. So that diversity really attracted me, and it opened up my mind. And I think it's very important. It's a very important skill to have. Esther and Julia both talked about it, and I also feel that having that diversity it really flexes your brain and uh, pushes you to learn those skills and expose yourself more. And the other thing I found is that the career paths of the people who pursue this course have ranged from journalism to curation to academia to policy making to cultural consultancies to freelance to setting up their own studio. So it really also offered me I knew that there will be a flexibility to build my own career based on the skills I learn. And also being in London was quite amazing because it is the hub of resources and of like museums. And like there's so much more exposure. It's a very diverse and it's a very cosmopolitan city. You meet so many kind of people, which again was very, very nice. uh, this is something I learned from my experiences, that when you are in a heritage sector, when you're just starting out as a creative professional, you should let your creativity and curiosity guide you, and like don't be scared to leap into the unknown. And as much as possible, participate in interdisciplinary collaboration. So there are projects, like at the RCA there was one project where like my seniors, they collaborated with people in Imperial College. Like, so scientists, historians, designers, they all came together to create a project at and even like when I started out, when I worked at Locus Design just after my graduation, there was this aspect of, so I was working on one very large scale museum project in India. It's on Jain museum. It's on Jain culture, and it's coming up between near Mumbai, between the Mumbai Pune highway. And in that project, there were so many stakeholders. So we had so many different kinds of curators, so many different kinds of designers working in studios to designers working in corporates, and museologists and animators and illustrators. And there was this sense of big interdisciplinary collaboration, and this is the need of the hour. So whichever opportunity you get, try to focus on that. And I think at a university level, when you're starting out, or when you're just in the university, try to work with people on group projects who have different interests from you, and do a project, and talk, like if you have an interview which says that interdisciplinary, you can talk about that collaboration itself. And I've recently like applied for a lot of jobs, and I've gone through a lot of like job descriptions, and everybody talks about this aspect of dealing with different stakeholders. So it is a much needed skill to have today. I've also mentioned two articles here. They are more for inspiration, like the MFA is the new MBA, where they talk about, right brain thinking is very important. And I think it was a very good read for me. And also why collaboration is important. The other one, A Brief History of Collective Intelligence, is about that. Um, these are some projects I did as part of the MA. Like the left one, the word on the street, is started by my batchmates when we were just talking about capitalizing on social media. And this is an Instagram, this is an archive on Instagram, and they actually responded to collecting street designs which talked about COVID. And it's a rapid response scheme that you are archiving everyday heritage on social media. And this is a very different kind of project. And they also got the Design History Society Virtual Student Award, and I think now they are trying to do something more with it. So even like maybe you can capital this is one example of how you can capitalize on social media. Material History Virtual World is actually our symposium. It's a final graduation show which I was a part of organizing. And here also we collaborated with creative coders, graphic designers, and web designers as well. So this was a very enriching collaboration, and we try to see how our academic research can be converted in a format which is very, very public facing. And this the wave of tapping into the digital, I cannot stress how important it is. So please do tap into that. This is just a photograph. The one on the right is a photograph of a project I did at the VNA. I was a volunteer here, and this again was a great experience because it allowed me to network. If it allowed me to understand how systems work, though unfortunately it came to a halt because of COVID, but still it's a very big plus to have an opportunity with the VNA on the CV. And I think like what I'd like to stress, I think for students in India is I have a section on what are the kind of internship opportunities with other museums, but try to work on these kind of projects. They can really govern the kind of prospects you'll pursue after your graduation. So this is a mapping of the diverse career paths in the heritage sector. So one is I've seen that people pursue full-time academia, and when they are doing full-time academia, they also do government and independent projects. And ID is one institute. So the person I've mentioned here, she has done a lot of museum and heritage projects with the government in India, with the government of India, and she is also the head of exhibition design. And you can also check like in other national institutes what are the people doing and maybe connect with them. A full-time writing career is very rare, but some people do it. Achal Malhotra and William Dalrymple are two such people. Cultural institutions, as Julia mentioned, they have these kind of like very diverse opportunities, which I have tried to list here. So there's curation and interpretation, there's project management, there's collections management, editorial, outreach and learning, marketing, research, digital, cultural policy and administration. There's also journalism in arts and culture. So print, digital, and TV and broadcasting. With the pandemic, print has of course gone down. So digital. So anybody looking to work in journalism, I would encourage you to take up a publication which is digital or purely digital, because I had an email conversation with an editor of the Times of India, and she told me that and that a lot of publications of their they've had to shut down, and there's been this problem like in the print sector because of the pandemic. And digital is the new wave to ride on to, because my cousin is a journalist and she is working in a digital house, and she didn't face any kind of those problems. I've also mentioned some organizations. So of course BBC and Condé Nast are very big publishing houses, but Stir, it is based in Delhi. And for undergraduates, I think you can write to them, they do respond, and you can see if there's any kind of internship opportunity or an opportunity after your graduation. There are also some small scale organizations, and some of them I've mentioned here. So there's Tark and there's Art Deco Mumbai, Godrej Archive and Chatterjee and Lal. And Godrej Archive is a very good one. They also have a lot of internship opportunities. And Vrunda Pathare, I encourage you to connect with her on LinkedIn and Twitter. She is the head archivist over there, and she can maybe, you can reach out to her and talk to her about opportunities. I have heard her in a couple of sessions, and she seemed quite approachable. And for students in India, I think the the big opportunities, they lie in Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai and Kolkata. I am based in Ahmedabad. I have been based in Ahmedabad most of my life, and I feel that I wish I was in Mumbai or Delhi. I could have tapped into those opportunities more. So if you are in these cities, please do tap into the institutions over there. There are also a lot of cultural consultancies. I've mentioned some names here. Most of them offer, like, you can go get there after your masters, but there are these kind of museum design firms like Locus Design, Design Factory and Lopez Design, where you can go for an entry level role. I worked at Locus Design, and it was quite challenging. It was um, but it was amazing. I learned a lot. I could just work there for 1 year because I went for my masters, but in that 1 year I have learned a lot. And there's also the corporate sector. I've seen getting into the arts and culture and heritage space quite a bit. They also have this corporate social responsibility, so they are doing it through that. So Bloomberg Philanthropies and Google Arts and Culture, I'm sure all of you know. Microsoft in Culture is a podcast right now, but they are doing some work in this. Amazon, I've heard, but but it's still very small. So Bloomberg and Google are the big opportunities to tap. Like, if you want that kind of stable, secure job career, if you think that freelancing is not for you, you can try for these kind of organizations. Of course, you can't get there at the beginning, but maybe like from my reading of the CV of Google Arts and Culture people, I've seen that bachelor's plus master's plus 2 years of work experience should get you there. Bachelor's plus around 4 5 years of work experience can get you there. Some important skills are, of course, an awareness of technology, people management skills, because Google is basically a mediator between the cultural institutions, and it helps them show their collections and show their stories. So this understanding of curation and interpretation and people management is very important. I also think that like this is something I didn't know before, but I've seen a growth in technology, of course, a lot, but a lot of people are going in these kind of project management courses, and that can be a good opportunity. That can really lead to, like, management can, a degree in management or cultural management can lead you to these organizations more easily. So I would really encourage you to reach out to individual people on LinkedIn. I have done that, and ask them about their experience, and the response rate is just 10-20%, but it is there. So if they respond to you, I think it will be like quite amazing. uh, there are also people with independent practices. So such people, they generally have like a very they have a specialization. So these are sorry, I went behind, but yeah, so these are just some people I've listed. So Jane Withers Studio in London, Bose Krishnamchari, very big person. But Ishita Shah, she is into archiving, and you can check her work. Batul Raj Mehta, she is the person who established the India Office of Lord Cultural Resources, and she worked there for I think 15-20 years, and then she has founded her own consultancy. There are also people who work across different sectors of publishing, curation, teaching across institutions, and some people I've mentioned here. So I've tried to break, what are the kinds of master's courses I have come across in the last 2 years. So One is definitely the university level. Like, you have your chosen field of specialism, and it can range from architectural history to textiles to conservation to media. And, you can just go in that. And this trend of going in management and digital humanities. So I think King's, for people looking to do a master's in the UK, check the courses of King's College. They have this arts and culture management course, they have digital humanities course, and people with these kind of courses have gone on to work for Google Arts and Culture. In India, so this is an option I have been thinking about, and I've seen some people do an MBA. And in London, I've seen like a lot of people, some people in the UK, they have done their bachelor's in art history or design history, and then they've gone on to do an MBA and then worked at these corporate places, or even set up their own business. Even in India, I've seen some people. Why? And UNSW in Sydney is a college for that, which I've seen. In India, these are some universities which I've listed, very few. This is not even a one, this is not even 1%, but you can look institutes of this kind. And if you are doing a master's in India, try to see for institutes which offer exchange programs, that will give you an international experience for a much cheaper cost. Because like from my experience, I know that it has been a big investment, and like in the next 4 or 5 years, I know I'll have to work very hard to bridge the gap. And abroad also, I think UK and US are the most popular uh, places. And this is, I think, definitely targeted towards only Indian students. I'm so sorry for that, but UK and US are the most popular destinations. I've seen some very popular colleges I've mentioned. And Canada, I'm not too aware of, but Australia also, I've seen people do masters from this university, UNSW in Sydney. Also, you can go to agencies like Planet Education, which can help you right from the application process to understanding the scholarship and finances. uh, Sorry. And so this is one kind of master's courses which are there. There are also university and institutional collaborations. So one is definitely my course, which has the RCA and the VNA together. There is this MA Curating Contemporary Design course in Kingston, which is with the Design Museum. And there is also in New York, you have the MA History of Design and Curatorial Studies, which is with the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Museum, Parsons and Cooper Hewitt. So these are some programs I know. And yes, so if you feel that you do not want to do a master's full time, and but you need some kind of skill enhancement, there are evening and weekend masters on conservation, curation, heritage, which are run by the Dr. Bhavdaji Lad Museum and CSMVS in Mumbai. There are also cultural organizations like Intact, which offer a full-time 1-year master's, and it's a PG diploma in heritage studies and conservation. If you feel that if you want to work after your bachelor's, and if you want to do a master's later, harvard.edu and course era, they have really good courses which you can do along with your job to enhance your skill. So what are the kinds of opportunities for undergraduates? One is definitely internship. So MAP Bangalore has an internship program. You can go and check on their page. It's quite structured. Godrej Archive. Lord Cultural Resources also has an internship program, but I think that is more global. Bhavdaji Lad Museum, CSMVS, National Museum, they all have this intact. AEA Consulting is an international cultural consultancy which is based in New York and London, and they also have this summer analyst program, which I think is quite good. And yeah, I think for you can even start. The other option is to start by working in small scale consultancies. So you have BRMA, you have heritage synergies, and you can also work with, like earlier I mentioned, Locus Design and Design Factory. The third option can be to work on university projects or work with established individuals. Like we all have like my first like small project was to actually assist my dissertation supervisor on her research. So use those kind of contacts and start networking and see, if there's a professor whose work really inspires you, and you see them and you see yourself doing that kind of work, start working with them. NID, I know, hires fresh graduates to sometimes assist on their government projects, but these roles are not advertised. So network, and like I have an offer from there, like to work on one of their government projects, but it's for a more like a bit more senior level because I have my master's, but I got it through a contact only. It wasn't, the role wasn't advertised at all. So I really stress on the importance of networking. The fourth thing is, of course, to go freelance, but yes, it depends on your existing network and background. The pro is definitely to work on multiple projects. One con which I feel is that it's sometimes not, when you're applying for an institutional project, it's sometimes not considered as like a work experience. So I had to, send these work experience certificates, and I didn't have an official proof of work. So if you're doing any freelance work, try to get an official proof of work which you can show to employer in a cultural, in an organized institution. Everybody will ask you for that, for those letters when they are deciding your salary and your work based on your experience. So this is one thing which I wish I knew earlier and which I really wish I had done earlier. Uh, what are the opportunities for postgraduates? One is to definitely work, you can go back to your previous organization or job profile and work at a much senior level, or you can start at a bigger organization but at a junior level. Post graduation also opens up a lot of global opportunities. So there are these universities, like I've mentioned, Zurich University of the Arts. They are focused on hiring international people. So you can check their programs and you can reach out to people over there and see if there's any opportunity. Fellowships are also quite popular. A lot of my friends have done that after finishing their masters, especially like we have graduated during the pandemic, so there has been this whole stress about that too. So the Young India Fellowship, I know, is quite good. I would also encourage you to check Rare by Google. It's a creative leadership program, and it is targeted to professionals like us. And yeah, PhD, I think that's quite obvious. You can of course start your own. So, things to keep in mind. Social media, yes, definitely. Twitter, I've seen, is quite popular in museums and academia, and a lot of opportunities are advertised on Twitter and Instagram too. On Instagram, start following these different portals. Like in India, you have Agriculture India, you have CultureCon. Um, yes, 80% job market is hidden. So network and reach out to potential recruiters. And when you're reaching out to people, you can even ask them, what are the kind of skills you need for this job, and just check if you are developing those skills. The other thing is time and money management. Like we know that a lot of opportunities in this sector are volunteer, and sometimes you need to earn as well. So I think balancing that. We did talk about cover letters earlier, and like I've heard a lot of people say that keep them up to 3 paragraphs at the most. CV should be a maximum of 1 to 2 pages, and it should be tailored. And the other thing is that to see, specify keywords mentioned in the job description. Sometimes, what happens is that we have the relevant experience, but the way we describe it is in a way which the other person necessarily understand. So I think specifying and reading the job description and specifying those keywords is very important. Learn how to deal with rejection. I think as a creative professional, we have some different ideas, and it's very important to deal with that. It helps save a lot of time, and you can be more productive the rest of the time. Capitalizing on remote and digital opportunities. So I've mentioned like a lot of journals and magazines work online. I've mentioned 2 here. I'm sure like there are many more. And there are these kind of portals, you have museum of material memory, open-ended design, partition museum. So check with these people. Like partition museum, they have work, like they do work with freelancers, and they do work remotely as well. So just check these kind of portals. So I would like to conclude by, encouraging you to think about these questions and, what do you do? What are your specific talents, traits, values, and background, and develop a niche. How you can do this? This is like a rough Google Jamboard, which I have worked on. Like this is, I've written what is my specialization, how I've tried to answer these kind of questions. So as a self-reflective exercise, you can do that. It can really help you find your niche. So yes, so these are the four key things, and your skills, your traits, your knowledge, your background, and values. And at the intersection of this four lies your niche. So yeah, so please think about it and keep refining it. It will develop as you have more experience. Yeah, that's a wrap. And this is like, if you want to get in touch with for any more questions, please feel free to via any of these portals. Thank you so much. I think I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you, Deepika. This was such a thorough, fantastic presentation. I'm so glad we had you, because now we have the Indian perspective and what you can do in India. It was really, really extremely insightful for the students. Very, very interesting. How about students? Would you like to ask some questions or make some comments? I'd love to hear from you. And one thing perhaps I should say in the meantime, I'm very delighted by the fact that you have an interior design degree and also have this interest in design history. Because unfortunately, very often with the kind of applied design disciplines, proper study, research methodology, or history is really missing. And I think in order to professionalize the discipline of interior design, it is important to have that kind of knowledge, because only then will you be able to have the cultural literacy to develop projects that have more depth, rather than just kind of the pure kind of superficial decorative solutions, or just spatial planning solutions without any kind of proper concept development skills.
Yeah,
So,
I also think that with interior design, like the media, the way it is portrayed, it is just so fetishistic. And like I feel like design history, with its focus on public facing history, it can help to bridge that kind of gap too. Because yeah, you're totally right that like even when we study, we have these such good ideas, and when we go out in the market, think it's difficult to sell it. And if we have design history and we have this mediator working, it can help to make the discipline more professionalized and respectable, and much better design can come out.
perhaps you would like to just quickly talk a little bit about how you define design history, because we have architectural history, we have interior design history, we have decorative arts. I mean, how would you define it, and perhaps just share it with the students of what is included or what was included in your course?
So how I define history, how I define design history is actually by a question: how do people use and experience the designed world? Like I said that like in my course we had people ranging from so many different specialisms, but the core question at the heart of our inquiry was to understand how that design is being experienced by people and how we can write and communicate about it. So that is how I would define design history.
Well, of course, the word design is a complicated word. It's a noun, it's a verb, and I feel very often when we look at the history of interior design, it's actually not the history of interior design, but it's the history of interiors. So I would kind of differentiate between the the two.
Yeah. I and like about how complicated design is, our present understanding of design, like at least mine, it had been, that with the professionalization, like with the industrial revolution, we feel that, that the professionalization of design started. But one of my batchmates is doing her dissertation on 14th century, medieval history, and she's talking about some very highly technical objects, and even the word design was used by them as well. And she's talking about collaborative design practice in 14th century medieval Europe.
This is fantastic work. Yes, I heard this actually when you did the exhibition and you had the online kind of event. It was a wonderful event. Yeah. But now some students, please, we're taking some questions, comments.
I think Martina has a question.
Oh, right. I can't see this here. Yes,
hi.
please.
I wanted to thank you so much for your presentation. It was so interesting and insightful. In particular, I had a question about how the market is changing really quickly. You mentioned it. So since you're an insider of this environment, where do you see this type of industry moving and going in the next couple of years? And how can we best prepare for this changing context?
I think definitely technology. Like if somebody wants like tapping into the intersection of culture and technology is very important. That we are definitely going over there, and I think this has also been mentioned earlier, that diversifying your portfolio, diversifying your skills. Uh, uh, there was this trend, of being a specialist. I think around 5-10 years earlier, but now I think we may be moving towards being a generalist, because I try to really define myself, that yeah, this is my focus, this is what I'm going to do. But like I realized that yeah, some things, it won't work out. Like there are other things which are better. So one example I'll give, because like it will help you understand better, is I had done, like I mentioned, that my undergraduate dissertation on change in narratives of kitchen through lifestyle media. And I thought I'll focus my master's only on Indian domesticity, but that didn't work out, because like I was trying to like focus like I was exposed to other things. So I think these are the two things I've understood, that at least at the starting, like being a bit more generalistic, being diversifying, and technology are the two areas, and maybe management also. Because in creative industries, I didn't know, but there are these management consulting firms too. AEA Consulting, can check it out. It does amazing work. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much. It was really useful.
Right. If there are no more questions, I'd like to wrap it up. Please, you can always get in touch with us. I shared the website. Or there's one. Ayushi, yes. Ayushi, please.
Hi, Deepika. That was a really interesting presentation, and so nice to hear about your work. It's very your experiences are very transcultural, and they're very sort of global, and it's kind of nice how you really bring this together. You really connect to contexts, and it's really nice for, especially in a world where we are between places all the time. It's kind of nice to sort of see how we can build and work on projects like that. What I also really liked about your presentation was the bit in the end where you have this kind of you have a Google Jamboard, and then you have this sort of little self-reflexive exercise that that one can really find their niche with. And I was wondering what other questions can one ask themselves when trying to sort of when engaging in a process of self-reflection, because yeah, I was just really interested in how you formulated this question, and these questions, and what other things can we ask ourselves to sort of really find who we are, and then kind of present ourselves as something unique and sort of distinct.
Yeah, okay. So firstly, I'll say that these questions, they come from a workshop I had done. I think, I'm so sorry, I forgot to give the right credit. I've been doing a workshop on, it's called Fuel RCA. So it's about how it's run by Patricia. She's the owner of the Design Trust, and she asked us these kind of questions, and she suggested this exercise. and I had been doing it myself as well. But I think what other questions I think I'll ask is, when we talk about networking, it becomes we should think about, like, we should be a bit more practical, and we should think in numbers, and maybe write 20 people who we think can inspire us, and just focus on that, focus on establishing a bond with those people. And other thing is that, what other questions, one more, I think also having in mind what is a big picture goal. So like my big picture goal is to, like bridge the gap between the designer and the public and make design more accessible. And every opportunity I take, it is developing a skill towards that. Like it may not directly address it. Like when I worked in locus design, the project was on Jain culture, but the skills I learned over there, they helped me to develop a profile to, then work in a project which deals with design. So this is having the big picture goal. And the second is really like being sure of like what are your core 2-3 skills. So by skills I mean like my core 2-3 skills is, one is writing and research, and the other is I'm really good with management and coordination. Like I'm very very organized, very good with Excel sheets. So I always keep that in mind. And like whenever I try to go against something, which I'm not myself, like for example, we had this another show in June, and like I know that, like, making heavy videos is not my forte, but I still tried and I failed at it. So I'm not saying that don't step beyond your comfort zone, but like when you step beyond your comfort zone, like try to do it in a skill which you can excel at. So stepping beyond my comfort zone would mean that taking up a more challenging managerial project. So this one, when I was working on material history virtual world, like I tried to, I was a part of organizing the live panels. So that was quite challenging because we had these 5 panels, and we had to make sure that the event rights were right. We had to coordinate with the volunteers, we had to coordinate with the panelists. So that was quite challenging along with doing my own work. So that's how I would encourage you to think even beyond stepping the comfort zone. Yeah, I think these are the questions one can ask. Also, yeah, and another tip is about, I would say, about money is like when I started my first job, whatever salary I was getting, didn't, I did the mistake of, not checking the salary breakup properly and not checking if the details are correct. I think we as creative professionals are sometimes, too passionate, and if we get the work we want, we just go for it. And I also did that. And when I left the job, like it was my mistake. I didn't check that in my PF all the details were entered. There was a detail which was wrong, and it really took a lot of time to rectify it. So I would encourage you to be a bit more organized as well at that level, so that you don't face those kind of problems. And I've seen other people face this too. It's very practical, not related to the heritage sector directly, but it will affect you personally. So yeah, that's it.
I think your organizational skills certainly showed in the presentation, which was extremely comprehensive and, organized, looking at every angle. I mean, it was so well researched and so on. It was really fantastic.
Thank you.
Right, so we have a lot to take in. Thanks again. I hope I'll see all of you, some of you at the other panels. We have daily events now, usually at 8 p.m. every day from the 15th to the 19th of March. And it's wonderful that we have also this, the building of bridges between India and many other countries, and all of this, coming together in this series of panels we are organizing. So thank you very much for joining us. Have a lovely day. Bye.
Bye.